Look at her. 25 years old and so desperate she bound herself to a beggar. Sandra Lightmoon kept her eyes fixed on the ancient stones beneath her feet while her sister's voice cut through the courtyard of Silver Ridge Pack. Every wolf in the territory had gathered to witness her judgment. Their faces a blend of schadenfreude and vindication. She'd known this day would arrive eventually. Nothing good in her life had ever been permitted to survive. Tell them, Elena commanded, circling her younger sister like a predator savoring the kill. Tell them how you gave yourself to a drifter who appeared 4 months ago with nothing but torn clothing and calloused hands. How you disgraced our alpha bloodline by binding yourself to him under the moon without the council's blessing, without proper witnesses, without even consulting your own family. The murmurs erupted immediately. Mating ritual. The old way. Primitive and binding. Recognized by ancient wolf law, but scorned by respectable packs. Sandra felt heat climb her throat, but she refused to give Elena the satisfaction of seeing her break. She'd learned years ago that tears only made her sister crueler, sharper. "Where is this pauper maid of yours?" someone shouted from the assembled crowd. Did he run when consequences appeared? But then the gathered wolves began to separate, and Sandra's heart stuttered in her chest. She knew his footsteps. Steady, unhurried, carrying a presence that seemed to shift the very air around him. Marcus moved through the hostile crowd with his shoulders back, his long golden hair tied with a simple leather cord, his weathered face showing no fear despite being surrounded by wolves who wanted him banished. He looked exactly what they believed him to be: worn leather vest, patched trousers, work-scarred hands. To anyone watching he was nothing. A man with nothing to offer except labor and hollow promises. But when his steel-blue eyes found hers, Sandra saw something that made her chest constrict. She saw the man who'd repaired her broken window without asking for coin, who'd defended her when market vendors mocked her worn dress, who'd sat with her beneath the stars and made her feel valued for the first time in memory. She saw the man who'd made her believe she deserved kindness. "So you came back," Elena said, her voice dripping false charm. "I expected you to be 3 territories away by now. That's what men like you do when reality intrudes, isn't it?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He walked straight to where Sandra stood and extended his hand to her. "Stand tall. You bow to no one here. Before we discover who Marcus truly is and why he sees what others cannot, I need you to join the pack. Hit that like button to show your loyalty, subscribe so you never miss when the next story unfolds, and howl your location in the comments below. Let me know what territory you're watching from. Your pack is waiting. Now let's continue Sandra's story." She stared at his outstretched hand, scarred from honest work, strong, unwavering, and felt something fracture inside her chest. Slowly she placed her hand in his and let him pull her upright. The crowd shifted, sensing this wasn't unfolding according to Elena's script. "I came to speak with you about your sister," Marcus said, turning to face Elena. His voice carried an authority that seemed impossible, coming from a man in threadbare clothing. "Though I see you've decided public spectacle is more appropriate than respectful conversation. Public disgrace deserves public consequences," Elena snapped. "You seduced my sister. I asked her to be my mate. She accepted. We performed the sacred bonding 4 nights ago under the full moon with the ancient words spoken. I understand that's not how things are typically done in your territory, but where I come from, the moon's blessing matters more than a council elder's signature." The whispers intensified. Mate bonding ceremonies were ancient, rarely practiced except in the most isolated territories. Legally binding among wolves, but considered barbaric by modern packs. "Where you come from," Elena repeated mockingly. "And where exactly is that? You've been here for months without revealing your history, your family, or why a man your age wanders alone. For all we know, you're a fugitive. A exile." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "I'm neither. I'm simply a man who recognized something precious when he found it." "Precious?" Elena laughed, and the sound was vicious. "My sister is a liability I've tried to be rid of for years. She's plain, she's aging, and she has no standing because our family lost everything before she was old enough to understand shame. You call her precious because you're desperate, not because she has any actual value." Sandra felt the words strike like physical blows, though she'd heard variations of them her entire life. But then Marcus did something unexpected. He kept her hand in his and spoke directly to Elena and the assembled council with quiet steel in his voice. I have no pack here to negotiate with, and I understand that makes this arrangement irregular. But I'm stating my claim formally. I want Sandra as my mate. I'll provide for her, protect her, and give her the honor she deserves. That's more than she's received from her own blood. You have nothing, Elena spat. I have enough. And what I lack in possessions, I make up for in recognizing her worth when everyone else in this territory seems determined to convince her she has none. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Sandra's mother, Mara, finally spoke from the edge of the gathering, her voice hollow. If you take her with nothing. No dowry, no belongings except what she's wearing. We're finished with her. Agreed, Marcus said without hesitation. And when you abandon her, Elena added viciously, don't come crawling back to Silver Ridge. She made her choice. She'll live with the shame. She won't need to come back, Marcus said. And there was something in his tone now. Something that made several wolves take an involuntary step backward. Because I don't abandon what belongs to me. The way he said belongs to me sent a shiver through Sandra that had nothing to do with fear. Some instinctive part of her, the part that was more wolf than human, responded to that declaration with visceral recognition. But she couldn't understand why this stranger felt more like home than the family she'd been born into. Not yet. 4 months earlier. The throne hall of the Northern Territories was carved from ancient granite and illuminated by torches that had burned for 5 generations. Drake Greatmoon stood at the head of the obsidian war table, listening to the same argument he'd been hearing for a decade. 4 months earlier. The throne hall of the Northern Territories was carved from ancient granite and illuminated by torches that had burned for 5 generations. Drake Greatmoon stood at the head of the obsidian war table, listening to the same argument he'd been hearing for a decade. Your Majesty, the Council has identified 3 suitable candidates from established bloodlines. Elder Matthias droned, sliding a leather portfolio across the polished stone. Any of these alliances would strengthen our... No. Drake's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Silence fell. Even after 38 years, even after ruling for 15 of them, his refusal to take a mate remained the Council's greatest frustration. Commander Riker stepped forward from his position by the archway, his scarred face grim. My lord, perhaps we should discuss the more pressing matter. Drake gestured for the elders to leave. They departed with barely concealed irritation, their ceremonial robes whispering against stone. When the massive doors sealed shut, Riker unrolled a map across the table. Red marks indicated attacks along the eastern border. 5 villages in 6 weeks. The pattern suggests coordination between rogue wolves and foreign mercenaries. Someone's building an army and they're targeting territories where our presence is weakest. Drake studied the marks, his jaw tightening. Silver Ridge. Among others. Remote. Easy to infiltrate. Riker met his king's eyes. If this alliance solidifies, we're looking at civil war. Drake traced the routes between attack sites, his mind already calculating. Political marriages could wait. His kingdom couldn't. Announce that I'm entering the king's solitude, he said quietly. A month of spiritual retreat in the northern mountains. No visitors, no communications. Riker's eyes widened. You're going undercover. Drake reached into his desk and withdrew a small leather pouch. Inside lay an ancient amulet, dull iron wrapped in faded runes. The spelled metal hummed with suppressed magic. I need to see what's happening in these territories without the weight of a crown preceding me. He fastened the amulet around his neck, and immediately felt his alpha presence compress, his royal scent vanish. To any wolf he would register as nothing. A nobody. How long? Riker asked. As long as it takes to find who's behind this. Drake's reflection in the polished table showed a different man already. Someone forgettable, unremarkable. Someone named Marcus. Marcus arrived in Silver Ridge on a gray morning when the market square smelled of wet stone and desperation. The territory was smaller than he'd expected, poorer. Wooden stalls sagged under patched canvas, and the wolves moving between them had the lean, wary look of people who'd learned not to expect much from life. He was scanning for signs of the conspiracy, unusual wealth, new weapons, foreign accents, when he heard the laughter. Not the good kind. 20 coppers for a torn dress? A woman in fine furs held up a faded green garment, dangling it like something diseased. Sandra, even charity has standards. Marcus's attention snapped to the girl behind the stall. Brown hair in a simple braid, worn clothing, hands clutching the fabric the woman mocked. But it was her eyes that stopped him, cold, warm and wounded, holding on to dignity by sheer force of will. And then it hit him. The mate bond slammed into his chest like a physical blow. His wolf, suppressed beneath layers of spelled magic, suddenly roared to life, clawing against the amulet's constraints. Ours. Protect. The amulet held barely, but Drake's breath caught. This wasn't possible. Not here. Not now. The woman in furs tossed the dress back. Maybe if you had any talent, you wouldn't be hawking rags in the market like some. Is there a problem? Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying enough authority that both women turned. The wealthy wolf sized him up, threadbare traveler's clothes, work-roughened hands, and dismissed him immediately. She walked away without another word. Sandra stared at him, surprised and cautious. You didn't need to do that. Seemed like I did. He kept his voice gentle, fighting the urge to reach for her, to pull her close and never let go. The mate bond thrummed between them, but she couldn't feel it. The amulet saw to that. He needed time. Time to earn her trust before this became complicated. I'm Marcus. I do repair work. Furniture, tools, whatever needs fixing. He gestured to her stall. You have anything that needs mending? She hesitated, then slowly nodded. My cottage roof leaks when it rains. I can fix that, he said, knowing he'd just found his reason to stay. 3 weeks passed like water wearing stone, slowly but with undeniable effect. Marcus spent his days on Sandra's roof, replacing rotted beams and sealing gaps that had leaked for years. She brought him water at midday, and he noticed how she never took any for herself until he insisted they share. How she apologized for things that weren't her fault. How she flinched slightly when voices rose in the street. In the evenings he repaired her furniture. A chair with a broken leg, a table that wobbled, a chest with a shattered hinge. Small things she'd learned to live with because no one had ever cared enough to fix them. You don't have to do all this, she said one afternoon, watching him sand down the rough edge of her window frame. I can only pay you for the roof. I'm not doing it for payment. He met her eyes and something unspoken passed between them. I'm doing it because you deserve to live somewhere that doesn't fall apart around you. She looked away quickly, but not before he saw the shine of tears. During the day he also watched. Listen. The conspiracy was here, woven into Silver Ridge like rotten timber. Wealthy wolves with too much silver whispering in corners. Shipments arriving at odd hours. And always the contempt directed at wolves like Sandra. The poor, the weak, the expendable. He learned about her family too through overheard conversations and Sandra's careful silences. Her sister Elena, draped in furs bought with a rich mate's money, who visited only to remind Sandra of everything she'd never be. A mother who'd stopped defending her years ago. A father who'd chosen peace over protection. Why do you stay? He asked one evening as they sat on her newly repaired porch. Sandra was quiet for a long moment. Because leaving would mean they were right about me. That I'm not worth anything. She looked at him then, vulnerable and fierce. And I'm not ready to believe that yet. Marcus's chest tightened. You shouldn't. Because they're wrong. And he meant it with every fiber of his being. The fire crackled low in Sandra's hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls Marcus had helped her whitewash the week before. Outside, autumn rain drummed against the roof that no longer leaked. Inside, silence stretched comfortable and warm. I used to dream about it, you know, Sandra said quietly, staring into the flames. Finding a mate who would choose me. Not my family name, what's left of it anyway. Not some alliance or advantage. Just me. Marcus set down the knife he'd been sharpening and gave her his full attention. When I was younger, I thought maybe someone would see past what Elena saw. Past what everyone else saw. She smiled, but it was edged with old pain. Then I got older and I realized that dream was for girls who had something to offer. So I let it go. Sandra. Her name left his lips like a prayer. She looked at him then, and the firelight caught the unshed tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you this. You probably think I think you're remarkable. The words hung between them, honest and raw. You survive in a place that spent years trying to convince you you're worthless, he continued, leaning forward. You stay kind when cruelty would be easier. You keep hoping when you have every reason not to. His voice dropped. That's not weakness, Sandra. That's strength most people will never understand. Marcus. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her fingers were cold and he wrapped them in the warmth of his palm. The dream you let go? His thumb traced gentle circles against her skin. It wasn't foolish. And the man who could see your worth without needing your family name or status or anything else. He met her eyes and something fierce blazed in his chest. He'd be the luckiest man alive. Sandra's breath hitched. You're not talking about some hypothetical person, are you? No, Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not. Because knowing you has reminded me what truly matters in this life. The fire popped and neither of them moved. Her hand stayed in his and something fundamental shifted between them, something that felt inevitable and terrifying and absolutely right. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside, for the first time in longer than Sandra could remember, she felt warm. The gossip started as whispers and grew into accusations. Sandra and the poor drifter. Sandra throwing herself at a nobody. Sandra, so desperate she'd settled for a man with empty pockets and no prospects. Elena made sure everyone heard. She appeared at Sandra's cottage with her wealthy friends, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Still playing house with the beggar? How long before he realizes what a burden you are? The harassment escalated. Vendors refused Sandra's business. Pack members turned their backs when she walked past. Even children pointed and whispered things their parents had taught them. Marcus found her crying behind her cottage one evening, and something murderous rose in his chest. I should leave, he said quietly, kneeling beside her. Before this gets worse for you. Sandra's head snapped up, tears still wet on her cheeks. Don't you dare. Sandra. No. She stood and there was steel in her spine he'd always known was there. I've spent my entire life trying to earn their respect. Their approval. And I've never been enough. Her voice shook but didn't break. But with you, I'm enough exactly as I am. Marcus rose slowly, his heart hammering. So if you're offering to leave to spare me their cruelty, don't. Sandra stepped closer, her chin lifted. I would rather face their cruelty standing beside you than face their false respect alone. The words hung between them like a vow. Are you sure? His voice was rough. Because once we do this, there's no going back. I've never been more sure of anything. That night, beneath the full moon, they stood together in the forest clearing. Marcus spoke the ancient words, the binding ritual recognized by wolf law since the first pack walked the earth. Sandra repeated them, her voice steady and certain. When their palms pressed together, Marcus felt the mate bond flare even through the amulet's suppression. Magic older than kingdoms, older than crowns wrapped around them both. You're mine now, he whispered against her forehead. And you're mine, Sandra whispered back. Under the silver moon they became one. Drake had been gone 3 days, tracking the final connection between Silver Ridge's corrupt merchants and the Rogue Alliance. He'd found proof, names, shipment records, enough evidence to dismantle the conspiracy. He returned to find his mate on trial. The scene in the courtyard stopped him cold. Sandra standing accused, Elena circling with vicious satisfaction, the entire pack gathered for blood sport. Rage, pure and absolute, flooded his veins. He'd walked through that hostile crowd, let Elena mock him, let them all dismiss him as nothing. Because Sandra needed to know he would stand with her regardless of what name he carried. But when Elena demanded his exile, when she called for the council to annul their sacred bond, something inside him snapped. You want to know where I come from? His voice cut through the courtyard like a blade. Every eye turned to him. Drake reached for the amulet at his throat, the iron that had suppressed his true nature for 4 months. His fingers closed around it. Let me show you. He ripped the amulet free. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Power exploded outward like a shockwave, ancient, absolute, undeniable. His Alpha King aura crashed over the assembled pack with the force of a tidal wave. Every wolf within 100 yards dropped to their knees, their bodies bowing in submission before their minds could even comprehend what was happening. Elena hit the ground hard, her face white with shock. The pack alpha collapsed beside her, head down, unable to resist the overwhelming dominance rolling off Drake in waves. And Sandra, the mate bond no longer suppressed, slammed into her with blazing certainty. Drake felt it hit her, watched her eyes go wide as recognition flooded through every cell of her body. Mate. King. She swayed and he was there, steadying her with a hand at her waist. My name is Drake Greatmoon, he announced, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a king addressing his subjects. I am the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. He turned Sandra to face the kneeling crowd, his arm wrapped protectively around her. And your sister, he said, looking directly at Elena's trembling form, is the Luna Queen of our nation. The silence that followed was absolute. Sandra's hand found his, gripping tight, and Drake felt her understanding settle into place. The weeks of kindness, the hidden strength, the reason why a wandering craftsman had commanded attention he shouldn't possess. Hello, mate, he whispered against her temple. Her breath hitched. You're the... I'm yours, he corrected gently. Everything else is just a title. The howls shattered the stunned silence. Savage, coordinated, closing in from 3 directions. Drake's head snapped toward the forest. His eyes flashed gold, and his voice carried the absolute command of an alpha in his prime. Everyone inside the hall. Now. The pack scrambled to obey, their instincts overriding shock. Rogue wolves poured from the tree line. 30, maybe 40, with human mercenaries wielding silver weapons behind them. They'd been watching, waiting. The conspiracy leaders had gambled everything on one desperate strike. Kill the king before his reinforcements could arrive. They'd gambled wrong. Drake shifted, his transformation fluid and devastating. His wolf form was massive, silver-gray with eyes like molten gold, radiating power that made the attacking rogues falter mid-charge. This wasn't the suppressed presence they'd expected. This was an Alpha King unleashed. He hit the first wave like a force of nature, his jaws closing around the lead rogue's throat before the wolf could even howl. 2 more fell beneath his claws in seconds. Then the forest erupted with answering howls. The royal guard burst from the surrounding woods where they'd been positioned for weeks. 50 elite warriors in perfect formation, cutting through the mercenaries with brutal efficiency. They'd been shadowing their king since the day he'd entered Silver Ridge, invisible but ready. Drake's command voice rang across the battlefield. Take them alive. I want the leaders. The battle was over in minutes. The rogue Alpha, a scarred brute named Cardin, tried to run. Drake brought him down personally, his teeth at the traitor's throat, dominance radiating in waves that forced submission. When Drake shifted back to human form, breathing hard but uninjured, Commander Riker approached through the carnage. His armor was splattered with blood, his expression grim with satisfaction. Your Majesty. Riker knelt, then turned toward where Sandra stood in the hall doorway, her face pale but steady. He dropped to one knee before her. Luna Queen, Riker said, and his voice carried across the courtyard. The Northern Territories are honored by your ascension. One by one the royal guard followed suit. 50 warriors kneeling before the woman Silver Ridge had called worthless. Sandra looked at Drake, overwhelmed. He crossed to her, still catching his breath, and took her hand. They kneel because you're mine. And what's mine is precious beyond measure. Behind them Silver Ridge's pack knelt too, this time with reverence instead of mockery. The royal carriages stood waiting at dawn, their polished wood gleaming with gold inlay that seemed almost obscene against the worn cobblestones of Silver Ridge. Sandra watched the palace guards load trunks bearing the Great Moon crest while Drake spoke quietly with Commander Riker, finalizing arrangements for the captured conspirators. The pack had maintained a careful distance since the revelation, their eyes following her with a mixture of awe and shame that made her chest tight. She turned at the sound of hesitant footsteps. Her mother approached across the empty courtyard, her face haggard with sleepless nights and tear-stained remorse. Mara stopped several paces away as though uncertain of her right to come closer. Sandra. Her mother's voice broke on the name. I know I have no right to ask your forgiveness. I stood silent while Elena tore you down. I told myself it was for your own good, that you needed to be realistic to understand your place. Tears spilled down her weathered cheeks. But the truth is I was a coward. I let my own bitterness poison how I saw you. Sandra felt her throat constrict, years of hurt warring with the tentative pull of old love. Mara reached into her pocket with trembling hands and withdrew a delicate silver chain. A moonstone pendant caught the early light, swirling with inner luminescence. This was your grandmother's. She always said it should go to the granddaughter with the strongest heart. She stepped forward, offering it with both hands like a sacred gift. She would have chosen you. She always would have chosen you. Sandra accepted the pendant, the silver warm from her mother's palm. The weight of it settled against her chest as Mara fastened the clasp with gentle fingers. I forgive you, Sandra whispered and watched relief crack across her mother's face. But I can't stay here anymore. This isn't my home. I know. Mara cupped her daughter's face, memorizing her features. You were always meant for something greater. I just wish I'd had the courage to see it. Drake appeared at Sandra's side, his hand finding the small of her back with protective certainty. Mara stepped back and bowed her head in respect to the king, then to her daughter. Sandra turned toward the waiting carriage, toward Drake, toward the future that had always been hers to claim. The pendant rested over her heart as Silver Ridge fell away behind them, and with each mile she felt the weight of shame lift and the first true breath of freedom fill her lungs. The royal palace rose from the mountainside like a monument to power itself, its towers piercing the clouds, its walls carved from ancient stone that had witnessed centuries of wolf rule. Sandra's breath caught as the carriage passed through gates tall enough for giants, into courtyards where hundreds of wolves from every territory had gathered to witness their new Luna Queen. Drake's hand tightened around hers as he led her onto the grand balcony. His voice carried across the assembled masses with absolute authority. I present to you Sandra Lightmoon, born of no great wealth, carrying no political advantage, chosen by fate and by my heart. He turned to face her, his eyes blazing with pride. Her strength was forged in hardship. Her compassion grew from understanding pain. These are the qualities our nation needs. She is the queen you deserve. The roar of approval shook the stone beneath her feet, but Sandra saw the calculating eyes of the royal council watching from the shadows, weighing whether a former nobody could command their respect. The test came swiftly. Two powerful packs, the Ironhide and Shadowcrest, brought a bitter territorial dispute before the throne, their alphas bristling with barely contained aggression. The council expected Drake to render judgment, but he gestured for Sandra to rise. Her hands trembled as she approached the snarling alphas, but she thought of the market square, of being dismissed and belittled, of knowing what it meant to be unheard. She listened to both sides without interruption, asked questions no one else had thought to ask, and uncovered the truth beneath their rage. A shared water source running dry, desperation masked as dominance. You're not enemies, she said quietly. You're two packs facing the same drought, blaming each other instead of working together. She proposed a solution neither had considered, a shared irrigation system that would benefit both territories. The alphas exchanged glances. Slowly, deliberately they knelt before her. The council rose to their feet in acknowledgement. Commander Riker smiled. At the coronation ceremony, as Drake placed the Luna crown upon her head, Sandra felt the weight of it settle with perfect certainty. She had always been strong enough. The world had simply needed a king's eyes to finally see her worth, and now she would ensure no one else went unseen. And so Sandra Lightmoon became the queen she was always meant to be. But every queen needs her court and every pack needs its members. If this story moved you, if you believe in seeing the worth in others that the world overlooks, then prove you're part of this pack. Smash that like button and subscribe so you're here when the next tale begins. The moon rises on another story soon, one of betrayal, redemption, and wolves who refuse to bow to fate. You won't want to miss it. Until then, may you find your own king or queen who sees your true worth. The hunt continues in my next video. Will you answer the call?